teachers and pianists. My name is Jana Williamson if we haven't met before, and welcome to my home studio in the suburbs of Chicago. Today we're talking about how to teach the second movement of the Kuhlau Sonatina, Op.55, No. 1. It sounds like this. This is a very fun piece to play. It's the second movement of two movements. The first one sounds like this. And I do have a video on that, so check the description of this video or just click up there and you should be able to find it. Today I'm looking at this in the Succeeding with the Masters Sonatinas, book 4. It's also in Jane McGraw's books, both Encore Book 1 and her Sonatina Masterworks book 2. It also is in Keith Snell's level 4, Baroque and Classical. And I don't always love Keith Snell's editing, particularly for Baroque music, but I do like his Sonatina selections quite a bit. So worth checking out those books for that particular reason. The main features of this piece are this very fun rondo form and then the chromatic scales. We'll come back to the chromatic scales in just a minute. They were my student who most recently played it. They were by far her favorite part of this piece. So let's talk about rondo form a little bit. Rondo is A followed by a B section, going back to A, and then something different, a C, and then going back to A again. And you could conceivably keep doing that alternating pattern, but most stick to A, B, A, C, A. I think this is a really easy form for students to understand, especially when you're first looking at it and you find all of the A sections. You can point out, well, if you can just learn the one A section, then you know a lot of this piece already. Of course, the danger or downside there is the students tend to learn just the A section and then struggle on the other sections. So you want to make sure that you really do work on the alternating parts in between the A sections and they don't just practice the A section from the beginning. This is in 3/8 time, that compound meter. Now remember, even though 3/8 means 3 beats in a measure and the 8th note gets the beat, we're really going to feel this in 1 because it goes fast. The tempo marking is vivace. And so 3 and 1, da, da, dun, 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 dun. And really that's even just a whole 4-bar phrase going to the downbeat of measure 4. 1, 1. So it's like you've got these big singular beats that then move in 4 long beat phrases. So don't get caught up in a slow tempo or very pedantic 3 and 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3 and 1. Of course, your student probably needs to practice that slowly when they're beginning to learn this, but the goal is to feel it in 1. All right, so let's talk about those chromatic scales because they're so fun. I don't think chromatic scales are very hard. I've never had students who struggle with them. Once they learn the fingering pattern, which hopefully they know before playing this piece, it's a very easy fingering to do because we use our longer fingers on the black keys and our shorter thumb on the white keys. So if you use a standard chromatic scale fingering, it's just going to be 1, 3, 1, 3, and then when you hit 2 white keys in a row, 1, 2. Any good addition, like any of the ones I mentioned, will start the student off with that fingering. Of course, if you have a student who wants to use a more legato fingering, you can investigate that. There's another way to do chromatic scales, and that's perfectly fine. I don't know that at this level I would worry about it. I think I just want them to play their chromatic scales very evenly. Now, I made sure I talked about the meter first before I got to the chromatic scales because the rhythm right at the beginning of them can be a little bit confusing. It starts with a 16th note rest, and some students may not have actually seen that type of rest very many times before playing this piece. So it's important to include the left hand, or even just to tap the left hand on your leg where the chords would go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and of course most students at this point have probably forgotten that they're counting 1 and for 16th notes, not 1 E and so make sure they're really clear on their compound time counting. But 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and then once they can do that pretty effectively, you can actually use the real chords. Measure 32 is not a 16th note to start, it's an 8th note. So whereas we had 1 and 2 and, we have 1, 2, and 3, and 1. So just be careful that your student is counting all of that correctly. It also just helps if after the downbeat of 32, you lift up. So lift up and go on with your tumbling, scale patterns that come down from there. Also on the chromatic scale is very important to crescendo. It makes them so fun. You can tell your student your goal is that very top note and make sure they start softly. I lost my fingering in the middle of that scale coming down. So that's, I think, the best part of this piece, and you want to make sure from the very beginning your student is motivated to practice their chromatic scales, get the rhythm right so that they can really enjoy that part. Okay, we are in C major for this piece, same key as the first movement because it's just a 2-movement sonatina. Your student needs to have some idea of their C major chords. Notice that the left hand in measures 1 through 4 is the same as that beginning of the first movement. It's the same 3rd and 5th, so that's a fun little thing to know, and they should use the same fingering in this movement that they used on the first movement. However, because we have a B section and a C section, we are going to modulate to both G major as well as F major. So section B begins in measure 17. Very clearly 5, 7, and 1 in G. And then section C begins in 53, and we're very clearly in F major right now. We have these broken chords, 1, 1, 5, 5, 7, 1. So take some time to think about what key you're in, and because rondo form is so sectioned, you really can assign this for practice sake of only practice the B section, for this part of your practicing. Make sure you're very clearly thinking in G, even though the key signature itself doesn't change, the F sharps are all marked. But make sure you're thinking, okay, maybe do a little warm up in G. Okay, and then work on section B so that you're really, thinking very clearly what key am I in, what are these chords, how do they function. And your student doesn't have to have a ton of formal analysis theory background to understand we're in a new key and I'm using a lot of 1, 5, 7, 1 in this new key now, whichever one I'm in, G or F. Of course, I think articulation is extremely important in this because I do think it's important in every classical era piece. And Kuhlau has marked a lot of it. You'll find little differences between editions, but not much. At the beginning, you have these slurs over the bar line into 2 short notes, and I think they should both be equally short. Don't let your student hang on to the second one. That's not what we're doing. I don't find students do that on this as much as they do in other pieces. And then I love that in measure 3, you get the 3 short notes that then go to the tenuto at the downbeat of 4. Short, 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 3. And then the tenuto. Tenuto may be a word that your student has forgotten or didn't really know very well before this piece, so make sure they know that tenuto gets a little extra oomph. It's like you really love that note. It's easy in this phrase because you're just going to it, but you can find all the tenutos in this piece and make sure that you're really loving those notes. Another articulation point is in section C, so measure 53 and on that F major part. Students tend to not always observe the phrase markings correctly, so I found it very helpful to make sure they know exactly where to lift, particularly in the middle of measure 56. So we have this phrase, lift and go to here, which goes to here. I don't know why my students have had trouble ending the phrase at the right time, even right where I stopped at the downbeat of 60, so 59, lift, and now we start a new phrase. Those C's are not part of the previous phrase. So this is less about articulation and more about phrasing, but if you do the articulation wrong and you connect, a slur, then it of course wrecks the phrasing. So you might want to come up with some lyrics or at least practice stopping and breathing. So you could do 57. even that last little bit feels, even though it's not written, it feels like a two-note slur. So the E and G resolve to the F there. And then you get this nice little transition. Where are we? I think we're feeling our way back to the section A. That almost feels a little bit like a cadenza. It, like as in the F major Beethoven Sonatina, second movement has an actual cadenza where it's marked ad libitum. This feels a little bit like just for a few measures we're going to feel ad libitum, and then we end on that G7 chord, and we're back. So every time I teach a rondo, I make sure my students know, okay, we're in a new section now. Where is this section ending? Feels like we're working our way back to something. We made it back to A. And of course, you can always do imaginative things with your students to make different characters for the different sections, or at least a story that says, why have we gone to a different key here? Why is this feeling different? Why is the accompaniment pattern different? Whatever it is, it's a different part of the story. Oh, and then we're back to the A section. So what does that mean? Are we back home again? Are we doing a different kind of movement in the story? Whatever it is, make sure they have something that kind of centers them back around, oh, this is the A section again. Lastly, I will say that particularly because of those very fun chromatic scales and all the different sections, it's very easy to take a multitude of tempos in this piece. So you do want to work on with your student achieving a steady tempo, albeit with, some lifts between sections, some breaths, but really overall having a very steady tempo so that the different sections don't turn into different tempos as well as different characters. I hope this gives you a few ideas on how to teach the second movement of the Kuhlau Sonatina, Op.55 No. 1. If you have any questions about sonatinas or any other intermediate repertoire, please feel free to leave those in the comments. I'd love to know what pieces you and your students are working on, what your current questions are about teaching intermediate repertoire in particular. Please hit the subscribe button and the like button, and share this video with a colleague or friend if you found it helpful.